Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and I want to share some analytics as of this morning. We are now being broadcast and subscribed to on 6 continents, 40 countries, all 50 states, and 985 cities. We're hoping with this amazing guest we have on today, we're going to get to 1,000 cities. I want to read one heart letter that came in, I think, last week. Person said, "Hello, my son and I just drove from Rockford, Illinois, following a soccer weekend. The Bamboo Lab podcast got us home. Thank you so much. That meant the world to me." All right, without further ado, today we have a guest on that I've been following on Facebook for probably a year or so, and I've just been intrigued by his life, the things he says, the time he spends with his children, what they do. And so I reached out to him a few weeks ago and said, "John, would you be a guest on my podcast?" And he said, "Of course I would be." Today was the first time we ever spoke, a few moments ago. John is a 56-year-old man, single father of 2 daughters, age 11 and 15, and an adult son, age 27. They reside in Annapolis, Maryland, just outside of D.C. He has an undergraduate degrees in biology and business communication and a master's in economics and business from Johns Hopkins. He's currently a senior director of corporate operations for a Fortune 500 biotech company and an industry advisory board member of Stanford University. He enjoys public speaking, composing music in his home studio, running, reading, fitness, and spending time in nature. His favorite book outside of the Bible is a book called Essentialism. And I read that book, but it's by Greg McKeown. I can't pronounce the last name, but it's a really good book on simplification of life and just making sure that you're focusing on the things that matter, not trying to draw more in, but trying to use what you have and simplifying life. That's the best way to describe it. I've recommended it to several clients and they've all loved it. John's favorite quote is from Tony Robbins, and I do love this quote, and I had never heard it before. "Your past will dictate your future if you live there." I love that. So John Moser, my new friend, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's a real pleasure to meet you formally today, and I'm really excited about this conversation we're going to have. And hopefully, and this is my hope, is that what I say will resonate with some people who've gone through similar struggles in life as I have and are trying to see that light at the proverbial tunnel. And hopefully our discussion today will give them that hope and that assurance that no matter what you're facing, there is a way to get through it, and you will come out far better at the end of it.
That speaks volumes to me even right now, John. So thank you. And I told you yesterday through email, we're going to put on a darn good show today. And I believe that. Before we start off, to let the Bamboo Pack members know that we might have some technical issues. We might have some phone cutting and coming back. If that happens, John's going to simply call us back and we're going to keep rolling tape. So just know to expect that. These are just 2 friends talking on the phone and sharing wisdom with you. So John, so we can get started here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your childhood, whatever you'd like to share?
Well, I grew up in central New Jersey on a rural farm. I was adopted by a family, and this was around age 7 when my adoption was complete. I'm originally from Brazil, from Sao Paulo. And so I grew up on this rural farm in central New Jersey as a young person, which was actually a great experience because I learned a lot from my father, who never even went on to 8th grade. He could only do simple math, but he was the hardest working person I've ever known. And so by the age of 10, I was dismantling tractor engines and rebuilding them. And I learned how to plant and how to seed, and I learned how to cut firewood and how to do masonry work. So it was a really enriching childhood in the sense of all the things I learned from him. And then from there, I had 5 siblings, by the way, in addition to myself. And so from there, I went on to college, and I was one of only two of my siblings. My older brother and myself are the only two that went on to college. We paid our own way. I had to work 2 or 3 jobs to do it. I didn't borrow any money, and it took me a long time. I didn't finish my master's degree until my 40s. So a little, certainly not the cadence I had expected, but again, I did what I could because I was working full time. And I started my career in the biotech industry, actually, at the age of 22. And I've been in that profession my entire life. However, I always had a passion for writing and reading. I'm a prolific reader. And so I had an English teacher in the 8th grade writing future, and that's kind of always stuck with me, that I have to fulfill this promise to my teacher. And so a few years ago, actually in 2011, I started writing that book, which I actually dedicated to Connie Hill, which was my 1980. And the book was Link, The Fascinating Ways Our Minds Connect, which is all about ways in which we as human beings can better link and connect to one another. And that led to public speaking, and a whole new world opened up in front of me as far as personal growth and then connecting with people like yourself, who I never would have connected with if it wasn't for writing this book and doing the speaking. And so I also have a passion for fitness and wellness and minimalism and many other things, which we'll probably get into today. And as you mentioned, I'm a father of 3, a single dad. I've been divorced for about 10 years, and I've just found that to be the greatest privilege. To be a father, to be a leader to children is just an immeasurable, I can't even think of the word just to come to my head. It's just such an amazing privilege, really, to be a father, to have influence on someone that's looking up to you for security, whether it be emotional, physical, spiritual, relational. Can't say it enough how happy I am to be a father.
Well, that's the thing that really intrigued me at first when we connected. I'm not even sure how we connected on Facebook a few months or years ago. I was really intrigued and fascinated by how close you are with your children and so many of the things that you did. I think there was some dancing I saw. And does one of your daughters dance?
Yeah, both of my daughters are ballerinas, with my oldest going professional. She'll be turning 16 next year, and she's just on the cusp of going professional and is currently, in fact, she's got the lead role in The Nutcracker, which is in 2 weeks, and 2 Boston Ballet principal ballet dancers will. So she's super excited about that. And I'll be a backstage dad, actually helping with the choreography and this changing of the sets and all that fun stuff. You wouldn't want to see me dance. It would be terrible.
We did have a few technical glitches there, John, when you were speaking. You went out for probably two or 3 seconds, but definitely the gist of what you said with your daughter dancing and one going professional and one starting in the Nutcracker here in a couple of weeks. We got that. So we don't need to edit any of that out. That was perfect. John, growing up, you said your dad was a hard worker, wasn't an educated man as far as classical education, or at least academic education, was a hardworking man. Was he, or was there someone else your greatest inspiration?
He was, but I think one of the people that's my greatest inspiration, if I was to pick one person, it would be Joni Eareckson Tada. If people are not familiar with her, she had a diving accident at the age of 17, became a quadriplegic. And I believe today, and I don't know exactly what don't quote me on that, but I know. But anyway, I heard her speak once, and I have followed her for decades. She has painted innumerable amounts of paintings with her mouth using the brush. She has written a number of books using her mouth to actually tap a keypad with this pen because she can only move her face. She has inspired millions of people around the world, the government, to change a lot of the laws, opening up the doors for people who have disabilities. And unbelievable. I mean, her influence on the world is just mind-blowing. And here she's done all this, confined to a wheelchair, unable to even move her arms. All she can use is her mouth. And when I see that and I say, what are my limitations? What am I saying as a limitation when here's Joni doing these amazing things, inspiring so many people, and all she can do is turn her head? That, to me, has just been someone I would love to meet her someday. I've heard her speak, but my word, she just inspires me in so many ways.
Well, you just inspired me to try to reach out to Joni to be a guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast. So maybe that'll happen. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that would be great. She resides in Chicago, I think. But anyway, she's got a website and stuff. You can easily find her, but a brilliant speaker as well.
And I just want to share with the Bamboo Pack, there will be included a link to John's book, link in the body of today's podcast. Check it out. I ordered my copy, and I'm looking forward to diving right into it more and more. So, John, the world has gone through a lot of changes in the past 2-3 years. What have you considered to be your greatest learning during that time frame?
My greatest learning during that time frame is a further movement towards minimalism. And I know minimalism has a lot of connotations in the media. Generally, a minimalist is viewed as someone that lives in a very stark room with a guitar and a clock on a wall, and that's basically it, which is not true at all. Minimalism is not really defined by how many things you own, although in general, we try to use less things and get by with less because we waste a lot as a culture. But minimalism is also your digital world. How much are you exposing yourself to on a daily basis? Are you spending 4 hours on Instagram, and then you're hopping over to Facebook, and then you're hopping over to Twitter, and then you're hopping over to Snapchat, and then you've got 4 email addresses, and you're this whole type of life just takes us away from the organic side of life, connecting with people, being fully present with others. That's our culture. Light speed, right? Just go, 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 click, 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 have everything delivered to our door, all these sorts of things. Well, to me, that is creating a disconnect from people, having that organic connection. So that's been my biggest shift in the last couple of years, is moving away from some of that. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need those things, but balance it with less of a digital footprint, if that makes any sense.
That makes so much sense. And I've been doing a great deal of reading on neuroscience over the past several years. And one of the things that fascinates me is learning that the human brain is not designed for this much stimulation. And it causes so many issues of anxiety, depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, because our brains are so overly stimulated. And even with connection with people, I know for myself, when I'm around a lot of people for more than a day or two, sometimes a few hours, my brain gets overstimulated. And it always really has. But I think the digital world has exacerbated that, simply because when I'm by myself, I'm still being stimulated by social media, Facebook, Instagram, email, texts. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I have noticed that on Facebook as I followed you, that minimalistic mindset has really inspired me. I haven't done a whole lot with it yet, but it has inspired me to really make that a focus for 2023. John, I'm going to ask you a question that I always give my guests the opportunity to refuse to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And in the course of your years, as you've done some amazing things as a father, as a professional, as a human, what has been the greatest challenge you have ever gone through, and how did you scale that wall when you came upon it?
I think it's a great question because there's a couple of ways you can answer this. I thought about this one a lot, actually, when you had reached out to me. What is the greatest challenge? And challenges change as we age, right? When we were 20, maybe the greatest challenge, or 18, was the greatest challenge was getting into this college we wanted, right? Or, maybe in our later 20s, early 30s, meeting that life partner. I mean, all the challenges kind of change, or maybe having enough money to buy that first home. But in the last 10 years or so, the greatest challenge was coming out of my divorce, which was in 2012. And we had a very amicable divorce. In fact, my former wife and I are best friends today. We've maintained a really solid friendship. I have the highest respect for her as the mother of my children. We co-parent in the best way we can. We encourage each other. But coming into singlehood in your late 40s was a big shift for me. It was a challenge because things weren't like they were when I was in my 20s, because the dating pool is very different when you're 46, 47 than when you were 23, 25. And that's been a huge challenge for me because the landscape is so digital now, right? It's dating apps. It's people not just going to, parties or get-togethers and meeting someone. No, they're on Bumble or they're on Match or on this. And I found those apps to be disenchanting. I didn't like it. I felt like I was shopping on Amazon. I'm swiping through people's faces like sweaters on a storefront, right? And so that's been a huge challenge for me, is trying to navigate the new approach to dating versus what I'm used to when I was, like I said, in my 20s, which was in the 80s. And so, as time's gone by, I've learned to sort of let some of that go and not be so focused on it. and not be so self-aware that, well, so what if you're 56 and single? There's nothing wrong with that. We have this notion that if we're not with a significant other, then we're less of a person. That's not true. And it took me a long time to work through some of those mitigating thoughts about myself. Why am I still single at 56? I've been divorced 10 years. Well, it's not so much how long you've been single or how long you've been married. It's, well, how in touch are you with yourself? Do you love yourself? And if you can't answer that succinctly, there's work to do. And so that's one of the biggest epiphanies I've had in recent years is, John, do you truly love yourself? Because if you don't, you need to work on some things. So that's kind of...
That's very powerful. I'm working with my client base right now and helping them come up with what they want their 12 wins for 2023 to be. And I'm having everybody design their 12 wins, some personal, some professional. And one gentleman said, I want to be in a healthy, committed relationship. I said, well, you can't control that. I said, because that's something you can influence but not control. These have to be controllable items. So we came up with, for his focus is, for one of his big wins is to be very content and at peace being alone during this time frame of his life. And so then he put together the steps he has to do that. He's going to do some reading, meditation. He's going to go to a counselor and a therapist on how to go through this process. And I said, during that time, you might find the love of your life. I said, but you'll be prepared either way. So I think that's really powerful. That's very difficult for people in any Generation Xers or baby boomers to go through the process of divorce. And it's not even the divorce itself. Like you said, it's the singlehood. And, kind of navigating that landscape.
And especially if you were married a long time, right? And you were, like I said, in my case, single in the 80s, and then you're married, and then you're single in the 2000, whatever it is, what is now. Yeah, it's a very different world. But that's a great, bit of counsel you're giving to that client is take care of than I am now. I started to I never was a person who went to the gym. I was never really overweight, but I wasn't in shape. Well, that changed. And within 3 years of my divorce, I was running races. Today, I'm an avid long distance runner. I probably do 5 to 6 miles per day, pretty much every day. I just love it. It's a way of just really kind of getting things out of you just when you're running. And so just taking care of yourself, that self-love, self-care. Excellent counsel to that client.
And I think for any Bamboo Pack member out there who's going through a situation like that, who feels alone and feels lonely, we can be alone and not be lonely. It's a transition. There's a time frame it takes to get through that initial hurt. But some of the things we can do is just what you said, John, is self-love, self-care. It's exercising properly. It's proper nutrition and diet. It's maybe some meditation, some reading, new friend groups, or reconnecting with family or loved ones. There are so many stretching, prayer, yoga, so many things we can do that really don't take a great deal of time, and they take almost zero money, that can really get us through that challenging time to make sure that, to get us to the point when we love each other again, we love ourselves, again, and kind of get back to where we felt at one point at the peak in our life. It's not impossible for anybody going out there. In fact, it's highly possible and actually very, very probable that you'll do it if you follow the right instructions. So, John, at this point, you're 56 years old, father of 3, successful man, obviously a very wise, intelligent, learned man, well-read. What's a win for you at this point in your life?
Well, interestingly enough, I just grabbed the book, and I haven't started the book yet, so I'll put that out there. But I was thinking about friendships. I've moved a lot with my career. I work in a biotech career, and I've bounced around the country. I've lived in Boston. I just moved back from San Francisco 2.5 years ago. Lived in Nebraska. Lived in Illinois. Anyway, the point is I would make friends in those areas, and then I would move after 2 or 3 years because of the nature of my job. And so I started thinking about this as I moved back to Annapolis, Maryland 2 years ago. I had my daughters and my son, but the core friends I had were mostly in California, where I lived the longest, in the Bay Area. And so I picked up this book called Platonic. It's all about making friends and solidifying friends. And making friendships in our late 50s is a little different, again, than when we were in our 20s. And this book is written by Marissa France. She's a doctor, and it's called The Science of Attachment, How to Make and Keep Friends. And so a win for me right now is making a new friend. It's like, you were sharing when we were having our intro earlier that you met this person and you guys just clicked. And now you're getting together throughout the year and you're sharing each other's lives. You're encouraging each other. And that to me is magic, just having that organic, platonic friendship just, start to grow and right in front of you. And so to me, that's a win. Meeting someone and where you can just have that connection, you have some commonality, common bond, and then you make it into a friendship that lasts and sticks.
I like that a lot. And in fact, the friend you were referring to, I'm going to give him a shout out because I know he and his family are listening. That's Dave Dick out of Dallas, Texas. Everybody who's followed the podcast knows Dave very well. He's been on here 3 times, twice as the interviewer and once as a guest. So a shout out to Dave. I like that a lot. I find myself at this stage in life trying to shed old relationships that have been toxic for me over the years. And what that has done is it has allowed me more room in my heart and in my time to bring on more what I call nourishing people. The old saying is if you want new clothes in your closet, throw away the old clothes. And I'm obviously speaking, I'm exaggerating for effect. We don't want to, as you said earlier, throw the baby out with the bathwater. But in that closet of friendships or relationships and family or whatever it might be, we do have old clothes that are toxic now. They no longer fit our lives, and they can actually wear us down, bring us down. So sometimes to bring in those new friends, we have to evaluate our friend group. Something I did probably a month ago, John, is I sat down at my desk, I poured a gin and tonic, I had a little music playing in the background, and I put 3 columns in my journal. One was people who I know are nourishing to me. These are the people who I just love. When I walk away, they increase my sense of self-worth, and I focus on increasing theirs. Then I put on the 3rd column, I put people who are toxic to me, people who when I'm with them or talking to them, I feel less than. They decrease my sense of self-worth. And then I put a column of people in my life with a question mark, I don't know yet. And I circled the ones on the left, and I said, these are the people who I'm going to smother with my attention and love. And the ones that were on the far left or right column, the toxic people, I literally evacuated them out of my life. And not all, some of them I told them, we're done, and I no longer want contact because of this reason. Other ones I just started slowly spending less time with. And the ones in the middle, I'm evaluating. I'm looking, to me, it's like buying, when I look at groceries or when I buy food, a new item, I look at the nutrients in it. I look at, is it organic? What kind of chemicals are in it? And I think we have to do that with ourselves as well as the people we associate with most, because we do become an average of the 10 people we hang out with most often. There's a lot of truth to that statement.
That is a really powerful message, because I just came from a Tony Robbins event about 3 weeks ago. It's the Unleash the Power Within. It's a 4-day conference, and he talked about this topic over and over, not just him, but other speakers that were there. Who you surround yourself, that inner circle, I know it's an overused term, but it's true, is what you become. You take on their persona. You take on their viewpoints. You take on their modality. And it's not that we should surround ourselves with everyone who thinks as us, because that's groupthink. No, but it's people who are, like you said, you did that column, the toxic ones that are just tearing you down. They're just, they're not allowing your life to blossom. You have to cut and prune, just as you do in gardening. That is just so wise, so wise.
I love that. Cut and groom. Would you just cut and groom?
Cut and prune.
Cut and prune.
I grew up on a farm. We had fruit trees, and you had to prune the fruit trees in the fall. You had to cut them back, right? Because if you didn't do that, the fruit wouldn't be as good in the spring. So that cutting and pruning, it's, the tree looks kind of terrible when you prune it, but yet you get this great fruit the next spring. Well, it's the same as you did, right? Cutting out those bad relationships are toxic. It kind of hurts to do that. It's like pulling a Band-Aid off a wound. But then later in your life, you're going to go, wow, I'm glad I did that, because I have such more of an enriching life now. I'm not dealing with that drama or that headache and heartache.
Oh, I love that. I can't agree with you more. One of the things, and I really love what you said about, it isn't people who agree with us. That's groupthink. You don't want to be your life can't be lived in an echo chamber. One of the things that I've done, and I've taught my clients this, John, is when I say, when you have that nourishing group of your core people, I call these the circle the wagon group. They'll circle the wagons around you, and you will circle the wagons around them when they need you. And what I believe and share with my clients and loved ones is, when you have that group, there are 3 things you have to consistently do with them. Number 1, you have to support them. When they need support, you need to support them. And they need to, and vice versa. They need to do the same back to you. Then you need to celebrate with them. When they have wins in their lives, you need to be there to celebrate. You need to cheer them on and motivate them and inspire them. But the third one is where most people fail, is we have to challenge them, and they have to challenge us. So that's why it's so important to support, celebrate, and challenge together, because that challenging one is where you make sure that you're not living in an echo chamber. that that you are surrounded with people who don't always agree with you, because disagreement is not always disloyalty. It's just disagreement. And I've seen so much, and we all have in the country over the past several years, where if somebody disagrees with me politically or I could disagree with them, that's disloyalty. And that's not the way to leave people in your life because of a political reason. It's because they're toxic to you. When you walk away from them, you feel less of a human being. And that's a good judgment, a litmus test to determine who are the toxic people and who are the nourishing people. And then there's always the people you don't know, and you have to keep an eye on them. And you're going to eventually move them into one of the columns if you associate with them long enough, I believe anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of my closest friends, I'm a moderate when it comes politically, but one of my closest friends is ultra liberal, but it doesn't matter. We don't look at politics as a divisive thing. We learn from each other. We read each other's material, but our friendship supersedes politics. It supersedes a dogma. It's about just, we love being together and being friends. And so it's really, I think, healthy emotionally when you can discount that stuff. Sadly, we live in a polarizing culture where people just pick sides, and that's unfortunate. But again, I think it's to look beyond that. We can be enriched by people from all different viewpoints. It's just a matter of, do they look at us that way? Like you said, if they're looking at you and saying you need to transform your thought process, you need to think as me, that's not someone I want to be around. Absolutely not.
I couldn't agree more. I love and I'm a moderate as well. I love my friends who are liberals, and I love my friends who are conservatives, as long as they allow me to be who I am, to think the way I do, because I really believe you don't really truly know your political position unless you surround yourself with people who have the antithesis of that position, because how do you know? You might be standing in the darkness. You might not know because you've never seen the light. So I think it's so good to bounce ideas off of each other, thoughts and theologies, and any type of political conversation, as long as it's healthy and respectful, I think is very powerful. I mean, civil discourse is an incredibly powerful and necessary tool, and I don't see that a lot as much anymore. Thankfully, with some of the people I associate with, we can have those conversations and disagree at times, and substantiate each other at times. But at the end of the conversation, there's still love there. And there's still respect. Okay, John, we're gonna take a moment here, and you and I are gonna jump in a time machine, and we're gonna go fly back some 44 years. You're 22 years old. The world is in front of you. You're a young, vibrant, go-getter, ready to take on the world, and you're gonna sit down with your former 22-year-old self. What advice would you give yourself? What would you say is a good recipe for successful living?
I like this question a lot. The first thing I would have spent a lot more time in money management. I mean, that may sound like where's he going with that? Well, we weren't taught this in high school. I wasn't taught this in undergrad, of how to manage money, how to deal with credit, how to deal with debt, how to have a spending plan, a budget, these kinds of things. I didn't have a clue when I was 22, and I would just spend the money that came in, and I didn't realize why I never had any. I didn't have any goals for saving or investing. I didn't even know how to do that. And so if I could go back in that time machine, that is one area that I would have focused on, either myself. I would have, sought that counsel or read books on that topic, or taken a class on how to be a better money manager. I didn't learn those lessons until getting into debt, having, a near bankruptcy when I was in my early 30s and all that sort of thing. The other thing I would do if I could go back in that time machine is I certainly would have taken more time to establish a network of friends and not get married so quickly. And there's a lot of things I guess I could go back. But the big one for me would have been to have, again, been a wiser steward of my resources and then to get schools to start thinking about this, especially high school curriculum, getting money management into that curriculum, helping students understand what a credit card is and how it works. And so that would be my big thing. If I could go back to 22, it would be to have done that. I learned the hard way, as I did.
Well, the school of hard knocks sometimes is the greatest teacher. That's one of when I think of that question, that is always one of the things I come back to. I graduated from Central Michigan University in the 90s with a degree in finance. And it wasn't until I got hired on by American Express and I took my Series 7. I didn't even know what a 401k was until I took my Series 7 test, and I had a degree in finance. Maybe I missed that class. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I don't know. But I know that the education I got, even though it was in finance, was not the applicable type you can use in a day-to-day life. So any of you Bamboo Pack members out there who are thinking about that, hey, I don't know a lot about money. I feel like I'm in a really poor financial position. There's always a chance. There's always time. There's always time to get your things back together. John just mentioned he went through a bankruptcy in his 30s, and look at him now.
Well, here, not quite. I was close. I didn't have to file, but I was close.
Oh, close to bankruptcy. Okay. Close. I mean, and so anybody who's feels close to bankruptcy, or just kind of a little downtrodden financially, or maybe is in a bankruptcy or went through one, there's always an opportunity and a way to get back on track and become that financially secure steward of your wealth. John did it, and over the course of the past 20 some years. So we can all do it. I love that answer. I think that's such a powerful one for many of us.
One of my favorite authors is C.S. Lewis, and he has a quote which is very similar to Tony Robbins, and that is, "We can't change the beginning, but we can change the ending." And I know that sounds trite, and I know there's many people out there listening today are going through something really tough, and they're like, yeah, that's easy for you to say. But I can say this. I mean, I can remember in my early 30s, and I had nothing. And the church was helping to pay the rent, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just crying every night and just selling off all of my things. And it did seem like, how am I ever going to get out of this? How am I going to pay off these credit cards and whatnot? So I've been there. I've been in those trenches. I didn't have anyone to bail me out. And it just took years of hard work and finding a plan. I read a book called Debt Free Living by Larry Burkett. He's since passed on. He was an economist. That helped me. And then it took several years. It took, I forget how many years right now, but it was at least 6 or 7 to become debt-free. And then, as Tony Robbins talks about, which is, our past only defines us if we live there. If I go back and think that's who I am, that's who I was, well, then we're not going to move forward. We have to redefine ourselves. We have to come to a point where we say we are good enough. I am good enough. And look in the mirror and just not focus on your failures or the things you wish you could have done differently, but what can I do different right now in this moment? I cannot go back to my 30s when I made those really poor financial decisions. I can't go back to my 20s when I shouldn't have married that person or taken that job. I mean, if we live that way, we're like a farmer who's plowing a field and looking backwards, and then the plow is all crooked, right? So we can't do that. We have to define our today as, this is my time to reshape and change the ending, as C.S. Lewis says.
I really love that. I struggle, not as much in the last several years, but I struggled a great deal in my life with regret. And I realized at one point, regret is a prison cell with no key. And I think that's so powerful for us to all realize that right now, today, as we John and I talk with all of you today is the date, today's November 23rd, 2022. This is a day you can start doing one thing differently, one thing better to change your life, whether it's financially, spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally. You can do one thing today. Do it. Start small. Then tomorrow, do it again. And after a while, get 2 things, then 3 things. And all of a sudden, you have a toolbox of amazing habits you have established that have completely transformed your life. I think that's so good. Thank you for sharing that, John.
And, it could be simple as this. Let's say you want to lose weight and you've been struggling, and, you can just get a Fitbit or some other pedometer and say, I'm going to do 1,000 steps today. That's it. You just go out, do 1,000 steps, and come home. And then you do that for a couple of days, and then, okay, I'm going to go up to 1,500 steps. I'm going to go to 2,000. Before you know it, months have gone by. Now you're looking back going, I can't believe I used to just do 1,000 steps. Now I'm doing 10. Mm-hmm. But we have this mindset of big picture all the time, and we have to kind of get rid of that and just focus on one attainable goal that we can do. And then we just do that for a while, and then we just keep adding to it. And before you know it, time goes so quickly, right? It goes too fast, I think. And then before you know it, we're suddenly doing what we never thought we could do. And then when you get that down, you move to the next thing. But it's biting off more than we can chew is something I always caution people. Just don't go there. Just pick that one thing you want to work on now and just start doing bite-sized chunks.
John, you just described why I changed my name last year from Torch Consulting to the Bamboo Lab. Because I'm just so fascinated by the Chinese bamboo tree, which actually it's a grass, I guess. And I was reading about this. I read it many times that when you plant the Chinese bamboo seed, you water it, you nourish it, you make sure it has the proper sunlight, you take perfect care of it. You come back a year later, nothing's happened. 2 years, nothing's happened. 3 years, there's nothing happening. You're 4 years, you start to get discouraged. But between the fourth and the fifth year, it explodes through the earth and it grows 90 feet in the first 6 weeks. And it becomes one of the strongest trees / grasses in the world, where during typhoons and hurricanes, other trees snap off. This bends down, and it comes back to true form. Because what was happening in that first 4 years is it wasn't sitting there idly. It was establishing an incredibly strong root system underground that's primarily indestructible, and it's a fortress. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about simply starting small. You're not going to see the results right away, but you're building toward that. And eventually, it's not going to take 4 or 5 years like the Chinese bamboo. It's going to take weeks or months, and then you're going to explode to that next level. And you're going to sit there and go, wow, I'm glad I didn't give up when the seed wasn't coming through the ground. So I think that's just so powerful. Start small and incrementally grow, and all of a sudden you'll get that exponential growth at some point in time. And you can apply that to every single area of your life. So, John, you got all this stuff going. What's next for John Moser?
That's also a good question. And to be honest with you, I'm really, what I want to do, the next thing isn't so much an accomplishment that's measurable, financially, or write another book or something like that. But I have, coming out of this Tony Robbins event, one of the things, took so many notes at his event. If you've ever heard Tony Robbins speak, my word, he just gets the blood flowing. He gets, you get into this higher state of mind that you've never been in before when you're at one of his events, because he has us moving a lot. You're never sitting still. And I think the thing that I really, and look back a year from now and say, how did I do, is developing a tighter knit cadre of friends. And this is just something I really feel drawn to, is where I feel don't have that, because I've only been living here a couple of years, and I have my daughters and I know a couple people, but it's at a surface level. I think the next thing for me is to really just kind of pull away from some of the broader goals I've been working on, and just focus on building that organic connection with a couple of guys that are in my church or that I know through different channels. And I know that sounds simplistic, but I really feel that it's important, because we don't want to be, going through life and not have that guy or gal that we can just call at 2 a.m. when we're really hitting a wall. I mean, how many people can say that? I have a friend I could call at 2 a.m, wake them up, and they'll listen to me. And I said to myself, I don't think I have anybody that I could call at 2 a.m. And so that's really what I know. It's very simplistic, but that's the thing I'm focused on right now, is just spending time being a friend, and starting a new friendship's not always easy. It's not always as smooth sailing as you might think, but if you put the effort in and the time in, it'll reap great dividends. So that's really what I'm working on right now. I know it's simple, but it's important to me. Well,
I think the most amazing concepts and ideas in the world are the simple ones. Like you said, Tony Robbins' quote, that was, you become your inner circle. And so I think for a lot of us, if we look at ourselves and say, I don't like who I am, or maybe I'm not in love with who I am. Look at your inner circle. Who are the people that you communicate and connect with most often? You are simply an average of all those people. And when you were talking, I was going through my list and thinking, who could I call at 5 a.m? And I could honestly say I probably have, outside of family, of my children and my mother, probably 7 people. I think I could call at 7 a.m. And it's primarily because I have really focused on those people. But now, especially as I've kind of shed people who have been toxic in my life, it's given me so much more time in my heart and in my lifestyle to be able to communicate with them and become a better friend to them, because that's the way we do it. Isn't I'm going to go look for a good friend. To have a good friend, you have to be a good friend. And I think that's what you said. Part of that, establishing that cadre of great friends organically, is becoming one is incredibly important to that structure.
One of the things that we fall into as human beings is patterns, habits and patterns. And one of the greatest things that you can do to shake yourself up, no matter what you're going to be working on, is pattern interrupt. Interrupt the pattern, because it's uncomfortable. And you can challenge yourself in different ways to do this. And for example, for me, since I'm trying to make friends, is pattern interrupt would be, don't walk into a diner, for example, and sit by yourself. Let's say you see a couple people sitting alone. They're having coffee or tea or whatever, or maybe you have a breakfast. Pattern interrupt for me would be, walk in, just walk up to one of them people and say, "Hi, I'm John. What's your name?" And the guy says, "I'm Fred. Can I have breakfast with you and just chat with you? I don't want to sit by myself." That would take a lot of courage for someone like me. Interrupt the pattern. The pattern would be I walk into the diner, I sit by myself at a table just like everybody else. You never know. That person might say, "No, I really don't want to talk to you." Or that person might say, "Yeah, sit down. I'm Fred. I run the auto shop down the street." You just don't know until you take that risk and interrupt the pattern. So this is something I think is really important. It can be in a lot of other areas of life. What areas are you falling into the same patterns that you need to interrupt the pattern?
I love that term, pattern interrupt. I think that's so powerful. I can tell you, I would really struggle with sitting down with somebody or introducing myself. I'm an ambivert. I'm an extrovert at work. I'm an ambivert overall. Really in a social setting, I'm really an introvert who tries to be an extrovert. And that's probably why I get overstimulated and get so tired around people so often. So that would be a real struggle. That would be an amazingly huge pattern interrupt for me.
It would for me too, but I'm challenging myself to do it because that's where I'm going to get the most growth in putting myself in an uncomfortable situation, knowing the guy might just say, "Get lost. I don't want to talk to you."
Right.
But,
what are you selling? That's the first thing it would probably think.
Exactly. But then again, you might get that person that just says, "Hey, sit down. My name is so-and-so," and you end up making a new friend because every friend we have was once a stranger, right? I mean, the best friend, I have a best friend, Tim. We've been friends for 33 years. He lives in Pennsylvania. He's like a brother to me. We always say, "I love you," every time we talk. Well, there was a time he was a stranger and I asked him to go on a little paddle boat at this outing that I was at, and he hopped in the boat and we talked for 3 hours and we've been best friends for 33 years. So again, every friend was a stranger at one time.
That is very powerful. We talked earlier and I mentioned his name on air. Dave Dick is one of my closest, dearest friends. And we've only met one time. And that's the first time we met. He picked me up from the airport in, I think, Portland, Oregon or Vancouver, Washington. I'm not sure. I was going out to do some training and speaking. And they sent him to pick me up and he brought his wife and his 3 beautiful daughters. And we went to lunch before we went to the office and it was like instant connection. And even though we talk quite often, we text throughout the week. We talk quite often on the phone. We support, challenge, and celebrate with each other. And that has built an amazingly lovely relationship between us. One of the things that you talk about pattern interrupt, I struggle sometimes with, especially when I'm home alone. When I'm alone, I don't like to do physical exercise. I do it a lot and I don't like any of it. I do like hiking, but I run, I hike, I lift weights, I stretch. I do meditation now, very little, and I'm really trying to get into that. But I was telling my son, 2 weeks ago, I'm tired. I had a 3-hour break between coaching sessions on a Wednesday, which is normally my slowest day. And I went down, laid on the couch and thought, I'm going to take a little nap. And I thought, nope. And I remember Mel Robbins in her book, The 5-Second Rule. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I did 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I got up, threw my shorts on, laced off my hiking boots. I grabbed my weighted vest and I went out drove the 20 minutes to the hiking trail and walked, about almost a 4-mile hike with a weighted vest on. And I got back and I said, I need to do that with every part of my life. When I'm ready to cash in, and I know sometimes we need naps. I'm not using naps as the example here. When you don't want to do something, and my son said it best, the thing you fear most is the thing you probably should do. And I think that's all pattern interrupt. You've got to use pattern interrupt in order to do those things. Like this morning, I had a 45-minute break between coaching sessions. I had a client who had to cancel. So I'm like, I have to get my weightlifting in today. I might as well do it now. And I did not want to do it, but I did it, and I felt like $1 million afterward. And I don't always do that.
That is so true. The thing that we don't want to do, if we push ourselves to do it, you're going to come out. Oh, I'm so glad.
Always.
John, did that.
We lost you for a minute there, John.
Yeah, because
we lost you for a minute. Can you repeat that? I think that was good stuff.
I said that's such good counsel because in many areas of life, generally the best result comes when we don't want to do it. We don't want to go to that meeting. We don't want to go to that gym. We don't want to have that conversation with our child we've been putting off. But then when we push ourselves, that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, then you say, wow, I'm so glad I did that.
I'm coming up for titles for today's podcast, so I think I found a potential here anyway. The best results often come when we don't want to do it. I think that's very powerful.
Absolutely.
John, can you tell us a little bit? Go ahead.
The other thing that's worked for me is I established this years ago, and I never read this anywhere, so I'm not taking. Maybe I heard someone say it, but I just started to apply it. I call it the 10% rule. So the 10% rule is whatever I do, I try to add 10%. So if I'm in the gym and I do 50 push-ups and I get to the 50th, I add 10%. I add 5 more. And or if I'm reading a book, I'm like, I'm only going to read 2 chapters tonight. No, I'll read 2 chapters and then maybe half of another chapter. Just always kind of pushing myself subtly to do that, go that extra 10%. My daughter does this in her ballet. And, you would be surprised how this adds up over time. I said I was going to save $1,000, this quarter or whatever, and I saved $1,100. Just adding that 10% in everything. I'm not saying you have to measure everything you do, but it stretches you. It gets you to start to actually realize I can do more than I realized I was capable of. And I've found this to be really valuable. Again, I wouldn't use this in everything, but when you're trying to grow something in your life, adding that 10% margin, it does wonders over time.
I think it's a great piece of advice to add to the things that are most important to you. Those jugular things you're working on in life. Ed Milet, who's one of my favorite authors and podcasters, he has a book called The Power of One More, and he talks about that in different areas of his life, of your life, how you can add one more. And I think that's such a powerful, that little bit of stretch. If you're doing reps of 10 when you're curling, do 11. Then the next day, maybe do 12. Next week, do 13. I mean, there's so much power to that. And I mean, it's just like our minds, our souls, and our hearts are just like our bodies. It has to be challenged. It has to be pushed for us to grow in advance. John, can you tell us a little bit about your book, Link?
So Link, like I said, it was this promise to Connie Hoyle, my English teacher, when I was in 8th grade, that she said, I expect a book from you in the future. And when I wrote the book, I really had this vision of a book that would help people to realize that the most powerful way of accomplishing is by linking your mind to other people. Lone Rangers just don't accomplish great things. And so the book is a mnemonic, the title. So the L is about listening with attentiveness. And so there's a section in the book about that and various stories of people I interviewed who really were attentive listeners and what that resulted in. The I is involve your tribe. In other words, involving everyone around you. If you're a leader in a company or a nonprofit or even in your family, are you involving every voice? Are you listening? And the N is noticing nonverbal signaling. There's a lot in the book about that most of what we say is not with words. And are you really spending time with people to the point where you're fully present, your phone is away, you're looking in their eye, you're seeing their body language, and you're realizing there's more that they need to say that they're not saying, and you're not digging deep enough. And then the K is knowledge flow. Are you sharing knowledge with those around you? Because when you do that, you become someone who actually has greater influence because you're giving more of yourself away. So that's what LINK stands for, the listen, involve, notice nonverbal, and then knowledge flow. And so the book is a lot of stories. I spent almost 2 years going into some interesting places like the Department of the Treasury, the FAA. I went to the most winningest field hockey coach in North Carolina, just people in different types of things, whether it's sports, business, whatever, who were using these principles and had superior results over their peers with no money spent. They were just using these tools that we've learned in neuroscience of how human beings link more effectively one to another, empathy being the most powerful conduit. And so the book is also predicated on a lot of neuroscience about that in terms of how empathetic resonance really works, mirror neurons, for example, and things like that.
I don't know if we lost you if you were done talking, John.
I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Okay. So I'm going to share with the Bamboo Pack member out there who this is golden stuff. I cannot wait to dive further into this book. And as soon as I finish the book I'm reading right now, which is the Everyday Hero Manifesto by Robin Sharma, Link is next. So it's Link, The Fascinating Ways Our Minds Connect by John Serpa. Serpa was John's birth name, and that's his pseudonym on the book. So look for John Serpa. I'll include a link in the body of today's podcast. Please get out there. Grab that book. Order it from wherever you order books, but I'll include the link to the Amazon book so you can order on Amazon directly. So, John, as we begin to wrap up, is there any question that I did not ask that I should have, or anything, final parting words you want to leave with the Bamboo Pack?
First of all, I've truly enjoyed this, Brian, and I feel like I've made a new friend. And I don't say that as a cliche. You just are someone that resonates with me. You're a learner. You're someone that's got this, view of life that's just open, and you're just taking all these different things in to.
Hello, John. Just when you were saying something good about me.
who is just, you feel like you've tried everything. You've tried to, whatever it is, getting out of debt or working through a relationship that's just not going your way, and you've tried everything, or you've struggled with weight your whole life, and it doesn't matter how much you try diets or whatever, it just isn't working. I mean, I'm here to say that, I've been in those places, and the struggle is what creates greatness. And it's not so much that we have to attain those things like everyone else has. I don't have to be as slim as this GQ guy, on the cover of a magazine. I don't have to be as wealthy as someone that's flaunting their lifestyle on Instagram. I don't have to have this model relationship like I see in these Hallmark films, which are all fake anyway. But am I becoming a better version of myself? Am I able to look in the mirror a month from now and say, you know what, I feel like I'm a better person now. I've been working on not swearing as much, or I am working on eating better. I am trying to make my relationship more healthy. Just focusing on being the best version of yourself versus measuring yourself against, again, that Instagram culture or whatever it is that says you need to look like this and act like this and have this, blah, blah, blah. But just really focusing on becoming the best version of you and loving you. If you have to get to that point where you love yourself, no matter what people have said, what false messages you're listening to in your head that people planted, maybe purposefully or unpurposefully in your life. But really, this is something I came out of Tony Robbins' event, realizing there was some areas in my life that I didn't love myself as much as I think I should. And he really helped me to kind of unpack some of those, and we all have them, right? We all have those doubts, and some of them, again, were done by people who harmed us and hurt us in the past. But again, I'll just close with this: is you need to come to a place where you love you, and be your best cheerleader, your soul motivator. When you do that, the law of attraction kicks in, and suddenly people are coming to you, right? They're coming to you for advice. They're coming to you to hang out, and you're going, why? Well, it's that law of attraction. You're working on yourself. You're starting to love yourself. You're starting to become the best version of yourself. And that acts as like an attraction. It acts like a magnet. It's really powerful. And I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in terms of the relationship with my children that has gotten better over the years. And it wasn't always that way. Why? Because I wasn't fully present with them, but I was too caught up in my own stuff. Now I have these great conversations with my teenage daughter. She puts her phone away and we talk face to face. And we didn't have that 2 years ago. So anyway, I know I kind of rambled on a bit there, but that's my takeaway is just for people to realize you are a great person, and always hang that on your hat every day that I'm a great person. I am someone that's valuable. And I love myself, whether I have faults and idiosyncrasies or a bad habit or two.
Thank you. Actually, I'm speaking selfishly from my perspective. Thank you for sharing that, because I was taking notes, and some of what you just said hit me extremely right in the heart. There's a thing I call bamboo progress. And when I pray in the morning and I pray at night, I always ask God, please allow my family to be a better version of let each of us be a better version of ourselves today than we were yesterday. Then at night I say, please allow us to be a better version tomorrow than the person we are today through I call it bamboo progress, which is that Chinese bamboo seed. Making that bamboo progress every day, a little bit, little by little. And there's a quote by, and I've shared this on the air so many times, by Michelangelo when he had carved this angel outside of a cathedral. When asked how he did it, he said, I saw the angel in the marble and I simply carved until I set him free. And I think I love that. And that's one of the things I teach people is every day we're just carving away that excess marble. We are carrying around a fake ID by what we've been told and learned all of our lives. And most of that's all fake. There's a true identity inside you. I call it the true peak identity, or TPI. You carve and carve. You'll never reach that TPI because it's perfection. It's how you were born into perfection. But we lost that because we glommed down all this marble around ourselves. It's chipping away at that old useless marble, because inside there is that angel. There is that true peak identity that we have to strive for every day. And it's all the things you talked about. It's making those small incremental progresses, doing 10% more, focusing on your friend group. It's working on loving yourself. And I really like you got to come to a place where you love you. And I think we can end it right there, John, because I don't think there's a better way to end this podcast than that. And if you would give me a few minutes afterward, I'd like to keep you on the air after the recording has stopped. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast with our inspiring and amazing guest, John Moser. What I'm going to ask you to do is please click on the link and order John's book. And also, please look at this podcast and smash that like button. hit that like button, subscribe, follow us, and please, please share this with 3 other people. This message today needs to get out to the world more and more and more. I'll talk to you in a few days. In the meantime, please get out there and sculpt your life, chase your dreams, and become a better version of you. Get to a place where you love you. I appreciate you all.